I went from brand new immigrant and homeschooling mom of three to number one local listing agent in less than 2 years. And I have since sold over 1,000 homes, even though I can tell you I had absolutely no intentions of ever having a full-time business. And in this video, I want to show you exactly what I did that against all odds made that possible for me. And if you are a fairly new realtor, or maybe you just recently moved to a new area and you're essentially starting from scratch and you're trying to get established, if that's you, I think this video is going to be tremendously helpful to you. So what do you say? Buckle your seatbelt and let's go. I have 3 points, 3 specific things that I did that are very, very simple, very much common sense. But I can tell you that now that I've coached over 1,000 agents to date, these are definitely not common practice. And number 1 is competence. One of my favorite quotes is by John Wooden, and it says, when opportunity comes, it is too late to prepare. It's kind of like you never get a second chance to make a great first impression, right? And so I remember when I was working on getting my license, I was studying so hard. I was literally just like trying to get the content because English is actually my 4th language. And I was working every free minute I could get because, again, I was homeschooling 3 children. And when I finally had my license, I was like, oh, finally, like you breathe out a sigh of relief. But then reality sets in and you're like, oh my gosh, like this is literally just the beginning, right? You already know this because where do you actually start? And if there's one thing that I absolutely hate, it is looking stupid in front of people. Might be the German in me, I don't know. But if people ask you a question and you don't know how to answer. So I knew competence has to be somewhere at the very top for me, something I really need to focus on because I need to know what I'm actually doing, right? And so I worked on 5 things specifically. Again, common sense, but not common practice. And number 1 would be, since real estate is very locational and it's all about the community. And since I was new in town I didn't know anybody, I didn't know anything. I should say I didn't know anything. There you go. I told you English was my 4th language, right? But I knew that I needed to get to know the area really, really well. Every road, every street, every shortcut, every local business, every school, the whole school catchments, the different school catchments, I should say, right? And since I didn't have GPS back then, and we didn't have the fancy phone apps that you could just plug in and then they would talk to you and tell you what to do or where to go, right? I literally had to do everything by hand, everything manually, so to speak. And I think that ended up being a really huge advantage for me. It ended up really propelling me because instead of relying on, say, my phone like I would do today, I spent hours looking at Google Earth on my computer, and I would study topography maps, and I would look at elevation and drainage patterns, and I really wanted to get to know every square foot of my market area. And then I literally just jumped in my car, did a lot of driving, lots and lots of driving, because I wanted to go everywhere. I wanted to get a feel for everything. And in our area, and I used to work in the country, I should say. I live in the country. You have lots of gravel roads and then you have dirt roads. I mean, we do have pavement as well, don't get me wrong, but you're going to have like a bunch of gravel roads and then the grid all of a sudden stops and then there's a dirt road. And unless you have like a certain vehicle, you can't keep going. You got to back up. And if you were going to an appointment, guess what? You're not going to get to where you were going to go on time, right? And so knowing the location was so very, very important. Number 2, I actually studied the inventory, but I did it a bit differently than most people would. Most people would just kind of go online on the MLS back-end system and they would just look at what's for sale and they kind of try to compare a little bit, look at pictures, whatever. And if it's expired listings, if it's sold listings, that's all you can do. And you do the best that you can, right? But I would actually study the active inventory. And then I would go and preview every single property listing that was on the market at that time. And instead of just kind of looking at it real quick, I actually ended up writing down a certain type of information. I'm going to just say it like that. And then later on, I actually ended up turning that into a worksheet, which I have in my hand and I'm about to take you through. But at that time, I would literally write down certain things that I thought were important because you know how you'll look at like 10 houses in a row in one afternoon. And you'd be like, okay, which one had that white kitchen again? And which one had the dated kitchen? And which one had the musty basement? And which one had the crack in the floor? And which one had the attached garage, whatever. I mean, I guess you could look at a picture of that, but you know what I'm trying to say, right? Like you just forget things. And if you're looking at a lot of homes, like say there's like 50 houses on the market in your area, it's a lot to look at and it's a lot to remember. And again, because I hate looking stupid when people ask me questions, I literally created my own way of doing previews. And I would take these specific notes on every home that I would look at. And I have 10 questions that I would, and again, I developed this. It's not like I woke up one morning and I had this download back then. I'm like, okay, Lena, this is how you're going to do previews. Obviously, that wasn't a thing. But over time, as you get out there, you try things, you ask the questions, you look for stuff, and then you're like, oh, I should have looked for this. I should have paid attention to that. And then you go back and you do it again, right? And that is how you refine your system. And this worksheet, if you have my book, How to Get Listings and Dominate Your Market, you actually have this in your free bonuses already included. But I would look for the location, evaluate location pros and cons, right? What about the property itself? What are the pros and cons of this particular property, home, whatever it is, or if it's a vacant land? I would look at the layout, the functionality of that layout. Make notes on that, take notes on that. I would assess improvements and see, okay, so, sometimes the realtor remarks won't have that information. Sometimes all you see, it's an updated kitchen, but you don't see when it was updated. So you take a note on that, right? Sometimes the realtor remarks are going to tell you the kitchen was updated in, 2025, whatever it is, right? And so then I would look at the cleanliness overall on a scale from 1 to 10. And there's no judgment, right? I'm literally just evaluating and observing, and I'm just taking notes. How does the property show on a scale from 1 to 10? What about the air quality? Does it smell clean, musty? Is it smoked in? Are there pets in the home, right? And I would take a note on that. And then question number 8, if this was my listing, what would I have priced it at? And why? And when you start, when this is your first, second, third preview, whatever, and you're literally just new to the business or new to the location, as I mentioned earlier, you're not going to have all that much insight on your first or second or third property. But imagine you've been doing this for a few months, and imagine you actually take a folder like this, and you have all of these printouts in there for every property that's been on the market, in the last, 3-4 months, or however long you've been doing this. And you have this organized by maybe neighborhoods, maybe types of properties, maybe it's in town, out of town, commercial, condominium, whatever, farms, right? Whatever is applicable to you. But imagine having that level of insight. Crazy, right? Then I would ask myself, why has this home not sold yet? Assuming that it's been on the market for longer than, let's say, a month, right? And then the final question, what advice would I give the homeowners to improve the showability and saleability of the property if they were my clients? And you literally imagine they call you on Monday and they're like, you know what, Lena, our property just expired. It was Joe Blow from XYZ Realty, and we'd like for you to come. And we're just wondering, what should we do to get it sold? What would you tell them? Imagine you can go through every home that is currently on the market and you could have that level of insight. Wouldn't that be just completely different, right? Next, I would also call the municipality, and I would ask about property zoning and the permitted uses for certain properties, depending where they're located, right? Just a practice. And this might not be applicable in your market, but for us here, you could very well have a 20-acre property. And because you only have such a certain amount of frontage, you need a variance to have horses, because we have a lot of horse people in the area. And then you could have a 5-acre piece of property and you have a lot more frontage. And guess what? You can have 2 horses without needing a variance, right? And so, again, in your area, that might be different. But imagine, as the local professional, you need to know that, right? Because that is what actually causes people to lean in and trust you. That is what I'm referring to when I say, when opportunity comes, it is too late to prepare, because anyone can say, oh, let me get back to you on that. But if you're new and you really want to compete and you really want to stand out with the realtors that have been there for years, sometimes decades, guess what? You got to go the extra mile. And maybe your area is different, right? You can obviously apply it to your market area. But in my market area, I don't know, when I used to call realtors and I would ask certain things, most of the time they didn't know their stuff. And they'd be like, let me get back to you. And then how many times or how often do they actually do that? Right? Imagine again how different you're going to be perceived if you actually have that depth of knowledge about every single listing on the market. Imagine people talking about that, right? And when you talk to people at an open house or at a showing, regardless if it is your listing or not. You have all of this detailed info, not just in your head, but again, in like, a binder, right? Like all filled out inside of a worksheet. And then imagine if someone wants to ask a specific question, and you can literally pull out that binder with all of these worksheets, and you know everything about every property. You even know how it smells. Show me a realtor who does that. I'll wait, right? There's this principle by Tony Robbins, and he probably has it from his coach, Jim Rohn, but it's the decade in a day principle or idea. And the whole idea is that, when you're new to something, right? When you start to do something that you've never done before, it doesn't really matter what it is. But you can decide to just do what everyone else does. And you can move at a pace that everyone else moves at. And then, 10 years later, if you last that long, you can have 10 years worth of experience the hard way, right? Or you can choose to literally focus. And instead of practicing for, let's say, 1 hour a day, you immerse yourself. Because immersion causes conversion, and you practice, let's say 10 hours a day, if possible for you at this stage of your life, right? And you get 10 years worth of experience that much faster. Why? Because the feedback loop is so much shorter, right? You make mistakes faster, you learn faster, you uncover gaps in your system faster, right? And Tony tells a story where he's like, at the very beginning of his speaking career, he was determined he was going to be a world-class speaker with Jim Rohn. And he told everybody that he would do it much faster than everyone else. And the other speakers were kind of making fun of him. And there was this one guy, like literally, like totally well, whatever. Let's just leave it at that. They were making fun of him. And Tony was like, well, look, you practice your talk once a week or hold your talk once a week. I am practicing my talk 7 times every single day. At that rate, by the time you have done 50 talks, I will have done more than 2,000 talks. And the rest, as they say, is history, right? And so instead of trying to focus on making your, business cards pretty, right? Or tweaking your logo a bazillion times, which, believe me, nobody really cares about that. I would focus on skill. And that's literally, like, I really believe that is what helped me and propelled me so quickly, is because people would literally ask me and say, how long have you been doing this for? And I'd be like, feels like it's been forever. Why? Because I was doing all of this extra work, right? And that is what actually matters. And that's what causes people to trust you. Number 3, I studied every real estate contract, every document, every form that I could get at the office that I could get my hands on. Because again, when English is your fourth language, you have to work a little harder. And this ain't a walk in the park, right? Because I didn't know anything at all. And I wanted to know not only, like how to fill in the blanks in the contract, how they teach you in the real estate course. I actually wanted to know, what does a fine print mean? What does a fine print mean if I represent the buyer? What about the seller? What if I represent both? And what does it mean to me as the representing agent? Because it changes, right? And so I read everything over and over and over again. And I rephrased each of the paragraphs in really simple terms so that I could not only understand it myself. Hello, that's kind of important, right? And then many times I literally had to call my broker because you just don't know, right? But you also want to be able to explain it to your clients, right? And you literally want to bring it down to like 3rd grade, 5th grade level English so that it's understandable. Like, for example, there's a term in the offer to purchase that states that the seller warrants that on possession date, the property and all included fixtures and chattels will be substantially in the same condition as they were on the date of the offer, something like that. I'm sure your contract in your area has a similar language. And people sort of understand what that means. But have you ever had sellers dig up shrubs or swap appliances just before possession date? Or have you ever had your clients damage something just before possession date without telling you? Like, I had this crazy story happen to me. You're not going to believe this. Wild story. It was a divorce situation. And the guy had already moved out. I never actually met him. I was working with the lady to sell the house. And guess what? She had this huge in-ground pool. Some people love it. Some people hate it. It doesn't really matter, whatever the case. But when we sold the place, that pool was in pristine condition. They had literally just replaced the liner. It was phenomenal. Everything was like perfect, right? And this was in the fall. But the possession date for the new buyers was going to be in the spring. And where I live, it is below 30, and you can feel sorry for me, but I'm here because I chose to, but our winters are long and very, very hard. And this pool was obviously closed all winter long. And when, the buyers took possession of the place, it was still closed as well. And the condition that the buyer's agent had on that contract was for the pool to be professionally closed before winter, which, obviously we would have done that anyway, right? Long story short, come spring, the buyers take possession. And when the pool company finally opened up that pool when it was warm enough, the entire liner is literally torn up. It's cut up. Like somebody literally went in with a knife and completely cut the whole thing up. And you can imagine everybody's shocked, right? And everybody's looking to me as the agent and to the seller. And so they ended up suing us and we went to court together. And we did have a property condition statement on it, and this is actually very, very interesting, but what the buyer's agent actually forgot to do is he forgot to insert into the contract the pool and the inclusions as part of the contract, right? The only thing that he had asked for was for everything to be closed professionally. And so, and I should probably add, this agent was actually very well known. He was one of the top 1% agents, but I do believe that it was his son who probably filled out that contract, who was in training at the time. I'm just gonna give him the benefit of the doubt. Whatever, it doesn't really matter. Doesn't change the situation. The reality is you can obviously point fingers here, right? Who did what wrong? But and this is so interesting to me because the judge ended up actually judging in our favor, saying that we had a piece of paper that documented that it had been professionally closed, which satisfied the condition. We had a property disclosure statement, and the offer said nothing about the pool or the attachments to be included other than for it to be closed professionally. And I remember sitting in front of that courtroom with that buyer's agent, and he was very, very certain that his buyers would actually win the case. And I was like, I don't think so, not the way it was written. And I had to be careful how I say it, obviously, right? But I think you and I both agree probably that this is a very, very, very unfair situation to the buyers. But this is why understanding the contract language and knowing how to fill it out properly, depending on whom you are representing, makes all the difference, right? What you should have written is, at least that's what I would have done, is in quotation marks, the pool and all included attachments to be in good working order on possession date. And then I would have probably let that promise survive closing until the day that the pool was professionally opened, right? And obviously that's just rough language or rough verbiage, but it is very, very controversial story. I totally realize that, right? Everybody's going to have an opinion. I'd be curious what your opinion is. Actually, pop it in the comment section for me. But at the end of the day, your clients are going to be looking to you for answers, because that is why you are representing their best interest, right? And that's why you're making the big bucks too, right? And if you don't know what some of the fine print actually means in your contract, in your areas, all the different forms and whatever, right? I literally met with my lawyer multiple times and I asked him all of these what if and yeah but questions, and he would literally show me real contracts, and then he would have the client's information blacked out, obviously for privacy reasons, but he would show me, here's what happens with this one, here's how these people could literally cancel the contract because this condition wasn't whatever, right? Like timing or whatever. Sometimes things are satisfied too late, and then there's so many different things that if a buyer has buyer's remorse, they could get out of the contracts. It's just very interesting. And again, I should probably add, I realize that in your area, especially if you're in the States, you have title companies that are closing that are doing that for you. You don't necessarily use lawyers, but still, when you explain things to your clients, instead of just reading the whole thing word for word, or the opposite of that would be like, when you just show them here, sign here, initial here, right? That is what causes them to lean in. You explaining everything in such a way where they actually can understand it, what it means, right? And that's why they end up referring you. And I would always add a little bit of humor. I'd be like, remember you guys, you cannot cut down all the trees in the backyard and sell them for firewood before possession date, right? And everybody chuckles, but everybody understands the point, right? What if the furnace or the air conditioning quits working 2 days after possession date? How about on the day of possession date? And I realize I'm beating this point to death here, but See, a rookie agent wouldn't know how to answer this. And I was a rookie agent and I needed answers, right? And like back then, I would ask my broker and he'd be like, well, Schumacher, that's why they have lawyers for. So that's why I ended up talking to my lawyer, right? And then what does the lawyer say? The lawyer's going to say, well, let's see what the contract says. And who wrote the contract? The agent, right? We're back to you. And so I remember my broker was telling me this one other story. And this was also in the country. He had sold his property in the country 2 weeks after the new buyers take possession date. Guess what? The well runs dry. Literally, no water. So who's responsible? The seller is like, there was plenty of water the day that we moved out. You can't argue with the facts, right? I mean, there ain't no water, right? And as it usually is, again, who do they point their fingers at when stuff goes wrong? And so my broker actually ended up paying for a new well, which is not cheap. Probably ate up all of his commission, right? And here's the thing. It's a used house and it's an old well. And at some point, things have to be replaced. And had the contract been written differently and had the buyers understood what it means and who is responsible for what until when, they wouldn't have felt entitled to having their agent pay for the well, right? He could have chosen to pay for it, or at the very least, he could have chosen to contribute to it, but that would have been a very different energy, right? They would have been beyond grateful for his help. And they would have told everyone a very different story. Are you seeing my point here? Are you seeing the difference? I think I made my point. Let's move on to point number 4. We're still talking about competence. Number 1 was knowing the area. Number 2 was knowing the inventory. Number 3 was knowing and understanding your contracts, which we have just finished. And then number 4, and this one, again, it might sound strange, but again, since I was a total rookie and I had never done this before, I had never actually listed a house, I practiced by listing my own house. And I literally documented the whole thing step by step. I measured everything. I filled out the contract, the data input sheet. I took pictures. I edited them. Have you seen this reel on Instagram? It's like the guy walks in and he's like, did you edit the video? And he's like, I edited it. And you edited it? I edited it. You edited it?
I edited it. You edited it? Yes, I edited it. Did you edit it?
I edited it. And he's like, no, sorry, I lied. I didn't edit it. You didn't edit it? I didn't edit it.
You didn't edit it? I didn't edit it. You didn't edit it? I didn't edit it. You didn't edit it? No, I didn't edit it.
You didn't edit it. And it just keeps going like that, and it's hilarious, but I totally am like off track here. But I edited the pictures. And back then we had this software. It was called ACDC. Play on words. You know, it was ACD and then SEE. And I don't even know if they still have it or not, but I would like work with lighting, and then I would crop out certain things that were maybe, you know how sometimes you'll have like a wide angle lens, and I had a really nice camera back then, and you take a picture and on the side you have like this massive pillow that's just like totally over big, right? And so like I would crop things, I would get a feel for like what looks really, really good, right? And if you've never done this before, let me tell you, going through every single step, it not only gives you a lot of good practice, but it also exposes the gaps in your current listing process, right? Which is literally non-existent when you start, right? Because you're going to have questions. You're going to get stuck. You're going to not know how to do certain things. And you're not going to know who to call or how to find out, right? And you're going to want to figure all of that out when you are doing this as a practice run, maybe in front of, your broker, but definitely not in front of your clients, right? Like, how much is the budget for gas, electrical, right? Maybe there is subdivision potential, right? Or here's a good one. How about open permits, right? You got to check, are there any open permits on the property that need to be closed before possession date? And I wish I had more time. I have another really, really good story on that, but I'll just keep going here. But the bottom line is you need to know the answers to these questions, because when opportunity comes, it is too late to prepare. So many new agents are literally wasting a large majority of their referral opportunities because, especially in the beginning, right? You just don't know. You don't have the moves. You don't have the practice. You obviously haven't mastered it yet, right? And you need to practice. So I would go through the whole listing process, and then if you are as crazy as I am, I would literally ask a friend or a family member if you can go through the whole thing with them at their property. And let me tell you, by the time you are on for the real thing, you're going to have the moves and you're going to have the rhythm. And I remember, again, when people would ask me and say, how long have you done this for? Again, such a good answer when you say, you know what? It feels like it's been forever. Because I looked like so young at the time, right? But when you have all of these little things that you do and the insights and the answers to all of these questions that people will have, and you have a certain system that you've already developed for how you do things, right? I'll tell you, oh my gosh, like all of that prep work, it's really going to pay off in the long run. Let's move on to point number 5. And the 5th thing that I did, I think really, really helped me to get started. I got to shadow my broker for a while. And depending on the size of your brokerage, obviously this might not be possible for you, or maybe your managing broker isn't actually selling anymore. But when we moved here from Germany and we started to look at houses, it was my future broker that we were actually working with. I didn't know it at the time, but I'm telling you now. And I remember I was watching what he was doing when he would take us through houses and he would show me how to test the windows, how many panes there are. He would like hold his watch against the panes and he would show me the reflections. Oh, triple pane, whatever. Little trick of the trade, right? He would show me how old the windows are because you could actually see a stamp in between the panes. You could see the year. He would flush the toilet and then he would like open up a couple of faucets at the same time and fire up the shower just to see the pressure, the water pressure, right? And I remember how that made me feel because I felt like our family was in really, really good hands. And when I was working on getting my license, I know like he would sometimes let me tag along and I would just like watch him do home evaluations, which I have to say that actually was more of a mystery to me because it was more overwhelming, I should say, than helpful because he had already been doing this for 35 years. And at that point, he would literally just like look at a house and then a few hours, he would call them back with the number. How he arrived at that number was a complete mystery to me. Like, how do you know, right? But I'll tell you, it was inspiring to me because you know how when you are in the presence of mastery, there is this ease, right? And it feels so simple and so natural. Like a true master will take something that is so complicated and they literally make it look so, so easy and so effortless. And let me tell you, that is an energy that your clients can feel before you ever say a single word. And you cannot fake that. It has to be authentic. And to me, I suddenly felt this weight, this like this massive responsibility. Like this is my sacred duty, right? There's so much money involved for the client. And they are trusting me to do this for them, right? I don't know if you can feel that, but to me, wow, you only have one shot at it. And so I was like, I must take this extremely serious. And I am going to do this. And I want to be at least as good as my broker is. That was my inspiration. And the lesson here is that if you want to get good at what you do, I mean, like really, really good. We talked about the decade in the day principle, right? But you also have to surround yourself with the right people. You have to get in the right room because energy begets energy. And with the right room, I mean the right brokerage to start with. Because, see, I really believe that joining the right brokerage is almost as important to the success in your business as marrying the right partner is to your happiness in life. And you might be thinking, Alina, that is quite the statement. But I really believe it's true. And not for the reasons that you might think. Because, see, my broker taught me a lot. But most of it wasn't actually real estate specific per se. Yes, I shadowed him for a while. Yes, I watched him do certain things and I learned a few like tricks of the trade, whatever, right? But what he really taught me is how to think like a business owner, how to believe in myself and go after my dream no matter what other people think. He taught me to never rely on other people. In fact, he never just handed me anything. He would never just give me the answer. He always pushed me to figure it out myself and to be independent. And he would always, always, always cheer me on when I brought in a deal or when I got a new listing or whatever. In fact, I remember this one time, it was actually in January and it was my second year in real estate. And I had done 4 deals by the end of January, which was about 20K in commission. And 10K out of that went to the office because I was on a 50-50 split. And I'll never forget how he said, "Good job, Schumacher, you kept the office going this month." You're the only one that sold anything. And I just remember feeling so good that my mentor was proud of me. And looking back, I can share with you that his influence was so huge for me, and that it's a big reason why I never gave up. I mean, I would have never been in real estate to begin with if it hadn't been for him, right? And I'll tell you that story at a different time, but I will be forever grateful, truthfully. Unfortunately, when I decided to start my own brokerage, in a different town where I actually live, well, he hasn't spoken to me ever since. And it's been about 17 years now. And I actually understand. He probably felt betrayed. And, that actually is the second part of the lesson. Because yes, it is important that you get in the right room when you start, but it is even more important to have the courage to move on when you have outgrown the room that you are in. Yes, I do believe in loyalty, and staying would have been infinitely easier. And it wasn't just about the commission, I can tell you that for sure. It would have been so much easier just to stay than to start my own brokerage. But that wasn't my calling. And if you think about it, had my broker not followed that prompting when he left his broker way back in the day, right? When he started his own brokerage, I would have I don't think I would have ever gotten into real estate to begin with. And I'm obviously not telling you to start your own brokerage unless, of course, you feel a calling to that. But I have learned, if I have learned one thing in life, it's that growth is never, ever comfortable. Not everybody is going to be cheering you on when you do decide to step out and do what you have never done before so that you can have what you have never had before. And if this message resonates with your heart and soul, just remember this one thing. Never forget the people who opened the doors for you. Even when you do part ways, always and forever honor and respect your mentors and never forget where you came from. Always stay humble. And whenever you have the opportunity, be the one who opens doors for others. So to quickly recap, that was point number 1, and we had 5 sub-points, right? Competence, I had 5 things that I did to prepare that I really believe propelled me to becoming the number 1 local listing agent and one of the top 1% in my community on the real estate board, actually in the province, so quickly. Number two is the ability to build relationships. And this one is so underrated because if the real estate business is all about relationships, which it is, and I mean real relationships with real genuine connection, right? Then the more relationships you have, the bigger your business is going to be. And more importantly, the bigger your impact is going to be, right? See, as humans, we are tribal. Wouldn't you agree? Like, this is why we congregate in places and groups all around common interests and common values and common beliefs, right? Whether that's a church group, whether that's at a golf course, it doesn't really matter, because that is where our like-minded people are. And that is the fastest way to find like-minded friends, especially if you are new to the area. Now, the greatest mistake that most agents make, honestly, the greatest mistake, I think, one of the greatest mistakes, is when it comes to meeting new people, they make it all about networking because they think about relationships as being transactional. It's all about strategic alliances. It's all about referral partnerships. I'm going to take my lawyer out for lunch so that I can, hey, I'm going to send you business and you send me business. You've heard this before. You might have done this before, right? I don't know about you, but I think people can tell. I really think they can. They can tell whether you're actually there for them or whether you're just there because you're interested in what they can do for you. And so for us as a family, when we moved here from Europe, literally, we didn't know anybody, right? Well, I should say we had some friends about 250 kilometers away, so I don't think that really counts, right? And we are people of faith. So we started to attend a local church, and we literally just had people over for dinner. And I feel like breaking bread with people, especially, when you open your home to them, it's such a personal thing and probably the fastest way to create genuine connection because it's the real you, right? There is no mask if you do it right. And if, you can't really have people over right now if it's just not something that is possible for you, well, what if you invited them for a meal at a local restaurant somewhere? It's something that I feel like isn't really practiced anymore. as much in the world. And I think people, especially after everything we've been through, people so crave real connection. And so we did that a lot. We constantly had people over. We still do. And some people you connect with really, really well, and others, well, they're just different, right? But you can still do a good job hosting them, create a memorable experience for them, and make sure they feel welcome and all the things. And I really think that looking back, this is something that ended up making such a big difference, even though I didn't realize it at the time. I wasn't doing it for what I thought I could get out of it, right? I just did it because hospitality is a big part of our culture and our culture as a family. It's something I'm just naturally good at. And what ended up happening is not only did we meet a lot of amazing people, we met a bunch of people who had been living in the area for multiple generations, and they were so well connected. They literally knew everything about everything. You know, the kind of people who will look at a building and say, oh, that used to be like the old credit union, or that used to be the police station, whatever, right? Like they know every business, like everything. And if you do make a good first impression and you never, ever, ever ask for anything, those people will end up being literally some of your greatest referral sources in the future, especially if they see you hustling and doing all the things that I am sharing about in this video. Now, on the business level, I obviously also reached out to some of the local business owners because I did need to build some connections. I needed a lawyer, I needed a home inspector, I needed a mortgage broker, all of those things, right? And I would just invite them for a simple lunch, and I asked a lot of questions. And I never asked for anything back. I just asked a lot of questions. And if you do this thing called listening that most people really they don't know how to do anymore these days, right? Because people love to talk about themselves. And if you express like genuine gratitude for their insight and the fact that they took the time to meet with you, you're gonna again make such a different impression, right? And someone very wise once said that people might forget what you said, but they will never forget how you made them feel. Might have been Maya Angelou. I think it's Maya Angelou, I'm not sure. Or like Zig Ziglar said, you can make more friends in 2 months by becoming interested in other people than you can in 2 years by, how does it go again? By trying to get other people interested in you. I think that's how the quote goes. Now, meeting new people is great, right? But that's just the first step. And you're not just going to be, building lasting relationships if that's all that you do, right? Obviously people start, they make the first step, but there has to be more to that, right? And so then the real question is, what causes someone to want to spend time with you? Or if you invite someone over for supper, what would cause them to want to come back or maybe invite you next time? And again, I know like literally this is so common sense. This is so elementary, right? But most realtors don't really care about stuff like this. They just want the tactics. It's like, tell me what to do. Tell me what to say. Tell me what to post, what ad to run, because I need results now. But see, I never thought that way. I really, really believe that it's because most agents are focused on lead generation that they're struggling with actually getting leads. That is why their business is stuck, because that's their focus. And that is why you're not making as much money as you could be making. I'm totally serious. And I'm literally challenging you for this coming year. If you are serious about growing your business, I would encourage you, stop trying to get leads and instead start building real relationships with real, genuine connection without expecting anything in return. And so then the real question becomes, what is it that actually creates a good relationship? Think about some of the people in your life that you just love spending time with. You can be yourself, no mask, right? No pretense, no agenda. What is it that causes you to enjoy that relationship? I mean, really, what creates the connection? Reverse engineer that and then just do that on purpose. Sounds simple, but it really isn't complicated, right? Because at the end of the day, relationships are all about trust. When you are a person of your word, you always tell the truth no matter what, even if it is uncomfortable. You show up without expecting anything in return, and you bring the joy, and you have a positive attitude and some humor, right? And you're a person of growth. You take initiative, you take responsibility for your mistakes, and you go after the things that you want. without having a victim mentality or this handout mentality where you think people owe you something, right? And people are just going to be lining up and cheer you on just because you got out of bed in the morning. When you are the type of person that just gives without keeping score, especially to those who can never pay you back, and I could go on and on and on. I don't know about you, but to me, that would be a person that I would love to spend time with. And that is the kind of person that I want to be. And just like everything else in this world, if energy begets energy, excellence begets excellence. And if you are that kind of human, you attract other humans who have similar values and similar ambitions, right? They are on a similar journey. And those just happen to be some of the best salt of the earth kind of people. And I honestly believe that if they see you working hard and being intentional about becoming the best, most competent, most connected realtor in the community, they see you hustling, right? And you actually care about people, you won't ever have to worry about leads ever again. Now, if the real estate business is all about relationships and connections and real relationships and genuine connection is what we're talking about, then relationships are all about communication, which takes me to point number 3. I really dialed in my communication skills. This again is something I had to do because I barely spoke English at the time. I remember countless of times where people would ask me something or they would make a comment, and I would try so hard, just to catch on to what they're saying and try hoping that they wouldn't notice, like literally. And then I would go home and I would write down the word if I could figure out the spelling. I would, try to incorporate it into my vocabulary in the future so that I could start using these words. In fact, I remember the first time somebody said to me, "Oh, wow, that's incredible." And I remember thinking, "Oh my gosh, that's such a big word. I wonder what it means. Incredible." And it's fairly easy to spell it out, I guess. I figured it out. I had a big dictionary back then and I looked it up and I'm like, I learned a new word today, right? And I'll tell you, this language barrier actually led me to doing this thing. It's kind of strange, but I'll share it with you, but it literally changed everything for me. To this day, it's one of the main things that I teach my coaching clients nowadays, because at the end of the day, what you say, how you say it, and when you say it makes all the difference. And I'm not talking about some cheesy scripts. Like, have you ever downloaded a script on the internet and then you read it and you're like, I could never say this. This sounds crazy dumb. You know what I mean? Like terrible. I could never say that, right? But the bottom line still is that what you say, how you say it, and when you say it will either open the doors for you or it'll close them. And since you never, once again, I'll keep saying this, since you never get a second chance to make a great first impression, how you communicate really does make all the difference. In fact, I would go as far as to say that, I genuinely believe this, about 99% of realtors, honestly, they miss out on about 99% of the client opportunities that they could be having because they're not good communicators. They think they are, but they're not. And the worst part is that they're not aware, right? Like when you don't know what you don't know. They have no idea. And when I teach this to my new coaching clients, they're like, like every single time, literally, they're like, that sounds so good. That sounds so smart. That sounds so compelling. I would totally say yes to this, right? And so when it comes to how you communicate, obviously you have words, it's what you say. You have tonality, you have pace, you have volume, right? Which is how you say it. And then there is timing. Like, have you ever had someone ask you something or like maybe make a comment and then you're like a deer in headlights because you have no idea what to say. And then like maybe hours later, you're like, should have said this, right? Or is it just me? Literally, when opportunity comes, it is too late to prepare, right? Are you getting it yet? Like, let's say, for example, you're at a CMA, practical example, and they ask you, so what is your level of experience with these types of properties? Or maybe they say, classic, so the other realtor we interviewed actually said it's worth more. What you say in that moment will make all the difference for you, right? It'll make the difference between you getting the listing or losing that listing. And if you are a complete rookie and if you know how to respond in an intelligent way, in a compelling manner, and they instantly just notice, they lean in because they respect you, right? And they're like, but if not, they will think that you're just another typical real estate agent. And so here's what I did. anytime that people would ask me something that I did not know how to reply, anytime they would comment on something and I didn't know how to answer, like what to say to that, right? I would literally write it down. I would write out the response that made the most sense to me. And I would just like ponder it because, again, later on when you have time to think about it, right? Like you can kind of figure it out most of the time, right? And the next time I would go back and I would test it and I would see how people react if I said certain things a certain way, if I asked maybe certain questions, right? Every possible question, every objection, every pushback. I would literally just like write it down. And I love to write, which actually comes a lot easier to me than speaking. Like honestly, like I love to sit down and I love to craft a paragraph and I will just work it and work it and work it until it like really is juicy and just, really, really powerful. And at some point, I had like pages and pages worth of conversations and language bits and dialogues and little analogies that I had compiled. And I would use them literally like every time I was in a situation, it would create such an energy shift in the prospect. And they'd be like, I never thought of it that way. Oh, that actually makes sense. And now it's a total different energy, right? A different conversation, right? And because it's, again, all in how you say it and the questions you ask. Because how when you try to convince people, that what you say is right and what they say is wrong, even if it's highly compelling, there's this disconnect because they would have to admit that they're wrong and that you are right. And people just generally don't want to do that. I don't know if you've ever noticed, but honestly, I don't know what's wrong with people, but that's just how it is, right? But when you ask people some really, really good questions, where it's not so much about the objection itself or the question itself, but it's the underlying belief that causes the objection or the question. And now you have a whole different level of connection, a whole different kind of conversation. For example, if someone says, we don't really want a for sale sign, or we don't really want an open house, we're very private people. What is the underlying belief? It's probably that they're worried that you as the agent or the other realtors are going to be coming through won't be pre-qualifying people properly, and that every Joe Blow that wants to come and see the house just happens to drive by, right? Even if they can't afford it, you're going to be bringing them through just, whatever. So everybody's going to be able to see their house. And if you just address the fact how important it is to have a for sale sign and how important it is to have an open house, it's a good thing, which we know they are, right? But you're going to be talking a lot and you're going to be sounding like just another typical real estate agent, and you're not going to be working on the root of the problem. And I literally have found that, a simple question like, you might be asking, what is your experience with open houses? And when you ask it that way and you just listen, you ask it in a very detached way, like you're not trying to convince them of anything. You're just curious. And you're just allowing the prospect to, number one, explain what the real concern is, right? Which you never know. They might have had a bad experience in the past, right? Maybe it needs to be addressed. Maybe it might be just totally viable, right? But number two, you also, as you ask additional questions, tell me more about that, right? Or what exactly causes this concern for you? And then again, you just listen and you allow them to feel heard and to just feel understood and address the actual root of the problem in a knowledgeable, intelligent way. And they're going to be like, wow, this realtor really is different. What you say, how you say it, and when you say it really does make all the difference between you getting the deal or getting the listing or getting the client or not. Let's use another example. When someone says, are you willing to reduce your commission if we buy and sell through you? The underlying belief is what? It's usually that agents make way too much money for what they do anyway, but you got to negotiate, right? And I'll tell you, no amount of proving your value and listing all of the extra things that you're going to do for them, nothing is ever going to convince them. But you know what will? A really good question. The right kind of question that changes their belief, right? And obviously, not something you can figure out overnight. And it took me a long time to figure this out myself. I'm not saying that I just had this and that's why I became successful, but me wrestling with this and me leaning into this and me trying and testing and adjusting things and changing and then you go back to the drawing board and you keep testing and you keep reiteration. At some point, oh my goodness, right? Like I've done like literally probably about 15,000 showings, easy. 15,000 times that I had the opportunity to practice, about 2,000 market evaluations, about 400 open houses in my career. And I've literally heard anything and everything that anyone could ever throw at you. And it is hands down one of my favorite things to teach. Literally my favorite things to teach, because you can see the change. You can see this is where you see the results so quickly. Once you do the work and you are prepped and you actually have this competence level dialed in, right? And I only gave you obviously like scratch the surface as much as I could within the context of this video. But once you have that dialed in and then you start creating a relationship, and then as you're connecting with people and you're communicating the right way and the way you say things, literally it changes everything. Changes everything, I promise you. Like literally, now that I'm finally on YouTube, I will teach you. I've had people asking me, Alina, can you just like do something? Can you post more content and whatever, right? Because not everybody can afford to work with you, and that's totally fine. That's why I'm here. That is why my goal is to be posting more content to show you all of these things that I'm talking about. In fact, if you have specific questions, don't be shy. Just post them in the comment section. I'll make sure that you get an answer. I'll make sure we create a piece of content that really adds value to you. Now, we could add a whole different layer to communication by also addressing the concept of different personality styles and how each style processes information, because it's all different, right? Everybody says things differently, hears things differently, processes information differently. And I promise I'll do that in a separate video as well. But those are the three things that I really dialed in. Exceptional competence, and I gave you 5 points. The ability to build and maintain real relationships, and how I communicated with people. That is what I believe helped me to go from brand new immigrant, literally not like didn't know anybody, completely unknown, to becoming the #1 local listing agent in my market in less than 2 years and sell over 1,000 homes.